2024 is done and dusted, and if you're like me, you're feeling excited and optimistic about the potential opportunity 2025 holds. Now, while you're feeling energetic and motivated about the year to come, one thing sits at the back of your mind. What makes 2025 any different from all the other years you've tried to make a significant change to your life? Well, there's actually something going on in the background that's leading us all to repeat this cycle every year. You know the one. It happens multiple times throughout the year where we set a goal or an objective in a certain area of life and we set out a plan to make a positive change, only for us to do it for a few weeks and then for things to eventually fizzle out. Give it another few weeks and we get so distracted that we completely forget we even set the goal in the first place. The reason why the end of the year feels a little different is the fact that we finally get some distance and space from our regular patterns and routine. We also feel a massive weight lifted from our shoulders. Things like work and school all stop and nothing huge is being asked of us. The idea that a whole year is coming to an end means we look back over a long-term period of our life and we can finally see the areas of our life we swept under the rug. Areas you know are important to you and you just didn't realize you ignored them for longer than you thought. You kept saying, "I'll do it tomorrow," and then suddenly a whole year has passed. It's only when you zoom out as far as a year do you really see the process at face value. Now, maybe you had periods where you were doing really well, but then you noticed that you were on and off at various stages throughout the year, which ultimately meant you lost momentum and felt as if you were starting over again. So here's the big question. If this year is truly going to be different than all the others, which it can be, what are you going to do differently? Well, in this video, I'm going to pull back the veil on this repeating cycle that plagues us all when it comes to making progress with a goal. I'm going to share a process I go through with my students to help them identify when this repeating cycle is about to derail them, and then how we get back on track and keep moving things forward. If you have absolutely no idea who I am, my name is Ronan Loons. I'm a movement teacher and coach. My work with my students is all about developing a more complete and well-rounded approach to movement, physical education, and training. Part of that approach is about observing how we manage difficult and challenging scenarios so we can understand ourselves better and learn to overcome them. We really have to laser in on these moments so they don't repeat themselves and bring a halt to our practice or our life. So that's why in this video, I'm going to show you what this cycle looks like and then the process I go through with my students to help them overcome it. So there's a 5-stage model called the emotional stages of change that pretty much explains why most people fail to achieve their goals. There's also one very specific stage that we're going to focus in on because it's the reason why it turns into a negative cycle that we repeat over and over again. Stage 1 is called uninformed optimism. Think of this as the stage you're in right now when it comes to your goals for 2025. You're dreaming and fantasizing about all the benefits you're going to experience, how you're going to be really consistent with all your actions, and how you're ultimately going to achieve your goals. You're feeling super optimistic about the venture and what the road ahead holds. The issue is that we're a bit naive at the same time. Remember that we're not currently taking any action towards the goal. We're just conjuring up this great plan and what it's all going to look like. We're uninformed as to the effort and sacrifice we're going to be making and what that's actually going to feel like when we're going through it. Well, this, my friends, leads to the next stage. Stage 2 is called informed pessimism. The reality of the situation and what it's going to take to change sets in, and our optimistic outlook quickly turns to a pessimistic one. Think about how many times you've tried to do something new. Even though you've just started, your mind starts thinking about how difficult this is actually going to be, how long it's going to take, and whether you really have what it takes to follow through with this goal. You're probably already considering reasons why you should abandon ship. But it gets worse. Stage 3 is called the Valley of Despair. This is that horrible point where everything sucks. Everything seems hard. You're ignoring the work and putting it off because you feel lost and like you don't have any answers to the problems you're facing. Any optimistic outlook on what you're going to achieve is a distant memory at this stage. Now, this is unfortunately the stage where most people quit, and it's what turns this into a repeating cycle. Enough time passes, say for example, a year, and you go back to a more optimistic outlook and start the cycle all over again. Now make sure you keep watching because I'm going to show you in a little while how we actually overcome this repeating cycle and make it to the next stage. That next stage is called informed optimism. This is when, despite the hard work and effort you're going through, you persevere. You keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're finding the answers to your problems, and you start to feel more optimistic about your chances of achieving your goals because your actions are starting to bear some fruits. This all leads to stage 5 of the emotional stages of change, success, and fulfillment. The mountain has been climbed. This is honestly one of the best points to get to because things actually start to feel somewhat effortless. Things that initially took a lot of effort and figuring out now happen with a level of ease and flow. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The elephant in the room has been identified, so how do we get through the Valley of Despair? Now that we know what the stages are, let's zoom in on that scary looking place called the Valley of Despair. If this is the area where most people quit, then we need to analyze this space so we can understand when we're there, what we're going to come up against, and how we're going to get out of it. So how do we know we're there? Well, remember, we have some warning signs beforehand with informed pessimism. I like to think of this as the I want to throw my toys out of the pram stage. As silly as it sounds, you're just annoyed at every single issue that arises. Everything feels like it should be moving faster. You're annoyed by the slightest inconvenience. We feel like we should be further along, but we're not. Here is where we have the best chance of somewhat detaching ourselves from the emotional spiral around the corner. Your emotional state is getting worse because of your expectations. You might think you have the skills or the knowledge to overcome what's in front of you, but the cold hard truth is you don't. And that's okay, because you can learn the skills necessary to overcome the obstacle in front of you. This is the process of change that everyone talks about. Learning to problem solve and figure things out. This is the ugly side of personal growth that no one talks about, but it's where the magic happens. You have to remain humble and surrender to the process. When I catch myself in these states, I like to remind myself that the problem still needs to be solved. Complaining about the problem will not solve the problem. Working on the problem, figuring it out, and doing the work will solve the problem. There's a certain point where you realize this is at the heart of everything we want to do as humans. We have problems or issues and they need to be resolved. They bring a halt to our forward momentum and we respond in very strange ways. We moan and complain, we get distracted, we say we'll come back to it another day and we do something else instead. All these actions make it seem as if we're working on the issue, but we're not. These are the actions that are leading us into the Valley of Despair. We're in a spiral of negative emotions, we feel lost and we're ready to give up. The actions we take during this stage will decide whether this becomes a cycle where we have to start all over again, or we make it out of the Valley of Despair and towards success and fulfillment. The most important thing to be aware of is that you need to stay focused, because distractions are everywhere and these are what pull us away from taking action. You have to imagine that the allure of anything else other than the problem in front of you is going to be really attractive right now. I recently watched The Matrix over Christmas and there's this scene with the woman in the red dress. Neo is being taught by Morpheus about how agents are everywhere and can take the form of anybody within the Matrix. They're walking through a crowded street, and right as Morpheus is explaining all this, a really attractive woman in a red dress walks by Neo looking towards him, and he's completely distracted by her. Now, why is this relevant? Distractions are everywhere. Even when things are going well, there will always be a woman in a red dress pulling your attention away from what you should be focusing on. The skill is not judging yourself for reacting to the distraction. As I said, this happens even during good times. We get pulled towards comforts like food, the TV, social media, all these things that hijack our reward system. We have primitive biological urges that can trigger an automatic response from within us to move towards a rewarding stimulus. This is what we need to be on the lookout for. When are we being hijacked and pulled away from taking action towards our goal? You have to really analyze and view these moments and take them seriously. Because right now, you're in the Valley of Despair. You're fed up with how difficult the journey has been so far. All the problems you're facing seem as if they can't be resolved. So a rewarding stimulus is going to look like the most attractive thing in the world right now. One thing I'd like to point to is the devious way in which this distraction shows up. Because it's not always about a distraction stopping you from taking action. Sometimes the distraction shows up to pull you towards a new opportunity. This happens all the time when it comes to physical activity. Imagine for a moment you've set a target of increasing your strength. You've been putting in work and you're taking action, but things are starting to take a little longer than expected. You're frustrated with your progress so far and you just feel like what you're doing isn't working. You're well and truly in the Valley of Despair. You get talking to a friend about what they're doing and they say they're doing something different. They're mad into cycling. They talk about all the benefits and what makes cycling so great. You think to yourself, screw this strength training, I'm going to start cycling like my friend. This is uninformed optimism all over again. You get started with cycling and you're all ready to put in the work. Things are much harder than you expected, you struggle to make progress, and you get frustrated at the fact that you're not further along than you should be. You're right back in the Valley of Despair. We need to get out of this repeating cycle if we're going to make 2025 a year of growth and change. I think with everything I've discussed, we have a good understanding of what the Valley of Despair actually looks like. Now let's have a look at a more specific step-by-step process to overcome it and make our way towards success and fulfillment. Now, before we even talk about the strategies and protocols to deal with the inevitable valley of despair, let's talk about the pre-stages to taking action towards any goal. If you set yourself up right, you'll have a much stronger base to stand on where you're resilient to distractions. I'm going to link you to a previous video of mine on how to set more meaningful goals. I'll put that on screen. I'll also put it in the description of this video. I talk about a process of setting a vision and an anti-vision. I think this is a good place to start with in terms of the goal setting process because it really cuts to our core and our deepest layers as a human. You typically start with the anti-vision to establish a negative outcome for your life that is a somewhat realistic future if you let your bad habits continue. Then you establish your vision, an ideal future you can use as a North Star for your actions. Now, why do I think you should go through this process? There's a quote that lives rent-free in the back of my mind from Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. I think the combination of your anti-vision and vision are the best way you can embody the meaning behind this quote and bear almost any how. I've personally been in the Valley of Despair a few times before, and this has really helped me on a few occasions. Remember, we're perceiving the task in front of us as difficult, effortful, and hard. We have to remind ourselves that this heightened emotional state is not a true representation of reality. We need something that snaps us out of the haze we're in. A combination of my anti-vision and vision have really helped me lift the veil that my emotions have put on reality and allowed me to reignite the spark needed to continue moving forward. I honestly think that you'll be in a much better standing by writing down an anti-vision and a vision for your future, so I'll link that video on screen again and I'll be sure to link it in the description as well. The next phase in our process for overcoming the Valley of Despair is awareness. Now, think about this for a second. We need to know when we're in the Valley of Despair. I've pointed to a few of the warning signs, but let me remind you of what I think is the most important thing. You need to become conscious of your response when you encounter a problem. If you're in a positive mental state, problems are usually no big deal. You may not even notice how when a problem arises during a positive emotional state, you just deal with it no matter how long it takes. Could take a whole day, could take a whole week, doesn't matter. You deal with the problem. But when you're in the Valley of Despair, it's likely that any inconvenience is going to frustrate you and probably cause you to spiral. You have to understand the value of being able to catch ourselves in the act of getting frustrated and zoom out from the situation. This is a life-changing skill anyone can develop. The best way to build awareness is through some form of contemplative practice. The one I've found the most value from is meditation. I can't tell you how many times I've been able to bring awareness to how I'm feeling or thinking in the moment and notice how it's not helping the situation. From there, I'm presented with a choice. Do I let this negative spiral affect my next action or not? It's not as if I'm perfect at it all the time. That's not the point. Over time, I believe you can build a level of awareness through meditation that helps you navigate life in a very fascinating way. You feel more centered and connected to your actions rather than feeling like you're being played like a puppet by your emotions and scattered thoughts. Notice how the two things I've mentioned so far have really been about things you do prior to or in tandem with actions towards your goals. The way to think of this is they prepare us for the Valley of Despair. This next step is the one that's most relevant to when we're actually in the Valley of Despair. It's how we're going to combat distractions. We've talked about what distractions will look like, and we've talked about why they can have a strong pull on us. But what are they pulling us away from? They're pulling us away from the actions that move us towards our goals. You can imagine that you've turned your back on your goals. You can't see them anymore, and you need to be woken up and reminded of them. You're like a member of the audience that's been brought up on stage by a magician who's waving a ticking clock in front of your eyes. You're in a trance by your distractions. How does the magician get you out of the hypnotic and distracted state? They use a word or trigger to wake you up. This is how I want you to think about this next protocol. It's something called the 3-6-9 method. It's a technique where at 3 p.m. you're going to write down your goals 3 times, at 6 p.m. you're going to write down your goals 6 times, and at 9 p.m., you guessed it, you're going to write down your goals 9 times. Now, before we go any further, let's try to look at this with an open mind and understand what typically happens when we set goals. Think about how many times you've had the experience of saying to yourself, I'm going to do this specific thing tomorrow. A few days go by and you suddenly realize, I didn't do the thing that I was supposed to do. We forget stuff all the time. We do it with our goals, and it's what leads us to being easily distracted. Think about what the 3-6-9 method is going to help us with. We have 3 clearly defined times during the day that hold a mirror up to our face. You're asked the question, are you taking action towards your goals or are you being distracted? And you need to go the whole 9 yards with this method. It's not as simple as just setting an alarm. I believe you need to take the action of actually writing down your goals here. There's something about actually sitting there, manually putting pen to paper and looking right at your goals that refocuses you. This is how you combat distractions. You refocus multiple times throughout the day and use some form of external alarm to help you, because the woman in the red dress will distract you at some point or another. Now look, I've given you 3 pretty solid protocols to help you make it out of the valley of despair. But like the famous phrase goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think when you're armed with these 3 protocols, you're in the best place you could possibly be to deal with the valley of despair, but you still have to do the work. I've guided my students through the valley of despair many times before. They come up with excuses to not get their practice in, they start self-sabotaging and distracting themselves from their goals. I feel like my role as a teacher and guide here is to highlight the spiral they're in and point towards the ways in which they can navigate their way out of it. It's up to them to take that action from there. Now, I've obviously had people over the years that do give up at this stage. It's unfortunate to watch because I know that the progress they're looking for is just around the corner. There's only so much I can do, but sometimes I just want to drag them through the next few weeks so they get to the other side. With these tools and protocols, I've had enough people get through the valley of despair, and it's a great process of change to watch unfold in front of my eyes. Seeing how positively charged my students are about the fact that they overcame such a challenging period really shows the incredible potential we have as humans. They're equally as amazed at how the process unfolded as well. There's a kind of magic that occurs because right as things seem to slow to a halt, everything seems to change in an instant. They make progress in their movements, they feel amazing when they move, the negative emotions fade and they're replaced with a sense of lightness and a more zoomed out perspective. This is where I get to say I told you so, and I totally get why they didn't believe me. I'm sitting there telling them that despite all the negative feelings and how difficult everything is, all they need to do is continue with what they're doing for a little while longer and then suddenly everything is going to change. It's hard to believe, but it's often the way it goes. Nothing changes, then everything changes. Now, if you're looking to explore how your body moves, build a more sustainable practice, and actually get some guidance and help along the way, you should consider joining us this January for the launch of the Connected Movement School. I'm launching a free online community full of resources, trainings, tools, protocols, movement tutorials, and more. This is going to be a space for people who want to learn more about the body and what a movement-based approach has to offer, and it's completely free to join. Not only are you going to learn about the body and the practices I teach, but you'll join a community full of others on the same journey as you. To celebrate the launch on Sunday, January 12th, I'm going to be giving away 4 weeks of free movement practice coaching. I'll bring you through the exact same process as my one-to-one online students. As part of everything, I'm going to be sending across 5 feedback videos that are going to give you an insight into how my coaching works, a 4-week foundational movement training block, a 4-week meditation program. You're also going to get loads of bonus material like a habit tracker, a daily mobility routine, and some practice reflection prompts as well. You're also going to get access to a community page where I'm there to answer any of your questions, so any queries or concerns that come up can be dealt with. You can also send any training videos across for me to review your technique so you know exactly what you need to adjust to get the most from that movement. This free community will have everything you could possibly need to get started with a movement practice and make 2025 a huge year of growth and development. If you want to get started on January 12th, click the link in the description below and you're going to be brought to the community page. Make sure you request to join and then you'll be given access on Sunday the 12th. I'll see you in there, folks.